Welcome to Medical Girl Mystical World. I'm your host, Dr. Julia Spinolo, and today I had Metta Edge, who is a licensed clinical social worker, and she actually is our next door neighbor here.
Yes.
At the Center of Love and Light and the Lighter Side Network. So she's right across the hall, and she's freaking fabulous. So I'm having her on my show.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
Yay!
Yes.
So there's a lot of things that we want to talk about. So
Great.
Kind of tell the audience about you and how you got into your work, because she has got some fantastic ways of having groups together and working with personalities and all that kind of good stuff. So I'm just going to jump right in and just have you tell us about you first.
Okay. So I initially, when I was a junior in high school, I fell in love with literature because it was about stories that seemed to have meaning and characters that developed and stuff that was hard to go through. And it didn't always work out beautifully, but it pissed me off really bad.
Yeah.
And I was reading Tess of the D'Urbervilles, which is a Thomas Hardy book. And he has an orientation and a perspective that's pretty dark about life. And really my temperament had been very optimistic about life and feeling very connected to God and hope and people. And so at the end of Tess of the D'Urbervilles, spoiler alert, she gets executed and she's innocent. And that got all up in my grill. I was really upset.
Yeah.
So I went to my teacher and I was like, what is this? And he said, that's life. That's literature.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that, but I also love that. So I ended up deciding to study English in college. I did not want to study education because I wanted to go deep into the stories and then get my master's in education. Okay. So I love the stories. And then I took a sociology class because it was required as an option, right? And I got a former cop who taught sociology about society and the real stuff. And so I ended up double majoring in sociology and English. But when I ended and I went to Emory for my master's in teaching, I taught for 1 year and I realized this is not the place for me.
Right.
In part because the education experience that I had as a teacher. First of all, I was a new teacher. I was young. I'm 5 feet tall. I was teaching high school. They're all towering over me. I was at a small school, so they had me teaching all the grades. So I was overwhelmed and stressed. But I was also, it was too much about tuck in your shirt, you're late for class, classroom management stuff, and we weren't getting into the stories.
Right.
And even though I knew these kids all had stories that they needed to be attended to, I was in no position at 23 as their teacher to even handle all of what was contributing to their challenges. So I went to a headhunter and I said, oh my gosh, help me. I have a degree in English and sociology and a master's in something I don't want to do.
Right.
And he's like, oh goodness, what are we going to do with you? And I'm like, please help me.
Right.
So he ended up sending me into the computer world, ironically enough, where I trained on the computer, did training manuals, I did writing. So I took my communication and writing skills to a cubicle where it was just the screen and the directions. And at that time in my chaotic, upset life, I was so happy to not be in front of people. It was like a cocooning time for me. It was also interesting timing because it was at the time that people were going to stop reading manuals. So I was writing these beautiful manuals and no one was reading what I was writing because the web was starting and no one's going to read a book about how to use Amazon. They're just going to want to buy a book.
Right.
So then I moved into, I want to be involved with designing the screen to be intuitive to what the people need at that moment. And so I ended up moving into, it was called, basically Usability Design, which involved interviewing people and getting smart about the exact pieces of information. And so once I started interviewing people again, I'm like, oh, I miss people. I don't want to be in a cubicle. I miss people.
Yeah.
And that all coincided also with just in my personal life. I was entering into therapy for some of your run-of-the-mill stuff, but some of your harder stuff as well. I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of codependency in my relationships. I had a lot of stress and demand of perfection and doing it all really well. I had a master's at 23. I had a house at 25. I was achieving all this, but I was still really not fulfilled. Yeah. And so I went into therapy, and I was drinking too much. I was, medicating my anxiety and that way as well. And at that time I was pretty disconnected from spirituality. And so I went into therapy, and I loved it. I just loved it so much. Yeah. I loved it so much. And I was really willing, in part because I think my temperament is that way, to be able to be open and explore. But I was just really suffering in ways I didn't realize I was suffering, because I had it together in lots of ways, a good career and all this stuff. But even in that, like 2 or 3 years of that, I quit drinking. I got out of my codependent relationship. My anxiety went down, but I was still, something was bothering me. And my therapist says to me, I think you're having a spiritual crisis. And I'm like, yes, that's it. Please tell me how to deal with that. Right. And so we began to explore that. And she gave me Gary Zukav's Seed of the Soul. Yep. And I read that thing in a weekend, probably by Saturday night. And I was so thirsty. We know in addiction that it's so much about thirsting for filling something that you're not going to fill with that other stuff. Right. So I just started, and at that time she began to a Metta-Physical type of spiritual group. So it was great timing, which is how I would say it then. Now I'd say it was kind of a synchronicity that was in alignment with my soul's path. That my therapist was at a place in her own vulnerability and courage to open up a group that was more metaphysically and spiritually minded, even though she was clinically trained as a social worker, and was really taking a chance to blend spirituality with psychotherapy. Yeah. So I was one of her first members of that group, and like I said, it really provided a place where I could quench that thirst and continue to explore. It's not just my growing up or my pains and wounds that I need to heal or maladaptive patterns that I need to change. This is about, who am I as a being, and who am I as a person, and how can I work with and experience life as not only just a reflection of, but have a relationship with life. Yes, my higher power, my higher self, with the higher sense of beings and people around me. So I'm just so grateful for that timing that worked out real well. Yeah, and it's you're talking, what, about 25 years ago? This is 20 years ago. It was 2000. Yeah, so that's really implementing those two together is quite something. She was really stepping out. So I was really grateful to be a part of a group like that. And at that time, so that's kind of where I was with my therapy. And at that time, I'm like, what are the initials after your name? Because I think I want to change my career and do what you do. This is so fun. It's impactful. The other people were coming into groups, so I was getting a chance to hear other people's stories and see how other people, and I'm like, I was realizing some stuff that I was saying was helpful to them. And I'm just like, I had reached a point in my technology career that was great. I moved into interacting and interviewing with people more. But I was designing screens for how to purchase something at the grocery store. Right. It just didn't have a ton of meaning for me. Right. It wasn't very fulfilling. Well, it wasn't. And people that do that, I apologize. I'm not saying it's not meaningful for you. For me, it was a wonderful launching point to helping me realize that I want more. So I went to social work school at the University of Georgia. And, let me get back to it. So I didn't understand what the initials were after my therapist's name. I knew she was a therapist, right? But I did LCSW. I'm like, what is that? And she's like, well, I'm a clinical social worker. And I'm like, I thought they just helped out with removing children from dangerous homes. Right. And she's like, there's a spectrum. Right. That's one of the cool things about social work. Right. Is that it's so expansive. And you can be a therapist and be a social worker. I'm like, really? So then I go, and y'all, it was 2000. I applied. I got in social work school in 2001. And I was in social work school when 9/11 happened. Oh, wow. And that's a great clinical experience. Holy cow. To be at a time in history like that, having a personal response, a community response, but being in a classroom where we're talking about society and how we can serve in the different ways to help society be more healthy. I just was amazed at that timing and just felt so grateful. So to be in the academic part of me, just loved being in an academic setting and not just with friends or just listening to the news, that we were talking about it and applying it to principles.
I was getting my master's during that, I remember.
Were you?
Yeah, I was doing my pediatric residency.
Right?
Yeah, and it was just, I remember seeing it on the thing, and the people were in the waiting room, and I was looking at these children. I'm like, what has our world come to?
Yes. See, goosebumps.
Yeah.
You know, what has it come to? And so there's this combined, like, oh my gosh, what has it come to? And oh my gosh, look what I've come to. You know, I've come to a place in my life, in the age I was, and the faculties that I have, and the program that I was already involved in, of like, I got work to do. This isn't just about, oh, Metta wants to talk to people about feelings. I'm like, this is like profound.
Oh, absolutely.
Know? And so then after that, I started my experience as a therapist. I could not just hop straight into doing therapy, which I was upset about as well. It's part of the deal, though.
Yeah.
And so I spent some time at Grady Hospital for actually some of my internship, but I was at an inpatient setting, and I did intakes for people coming in. It was at Ridgeview Institute. And I had a good experience there, but personally it was kind of difficult because I was an intake person. So people come in an acute state of crisis, and my job is to assess them well and thoroughly and assign them to level of care.
Right.
But I've got to hand them off so quickly. And so I'm not supposed to really connect with them. And when my supervisor said, you're spending too much time in the intakes, do not connect with them in the depth that you want to.
It's just the assessment and move them forward.
Yeah, because and I'm like, finally have my clinical social work degree, and I can't connect. Are you kidding me?
Right.
But when she said, they have to go and connect with their next person, and you don't want to have this already be a hard separation. So connect at the amount to where they feel safe to be assessed well, but you've already got to be kind of helping them move to the next person. So if they overconnect with you, they're going to have a hard time separating. Now, when she said that, it helped me. It did help, but it also meant that I'm still not going to stay in this job very long.
Right, but you were seen as a stepping stone.
Absolutely.
Because when you are in therapy, you build that relationship. It's that building the relationship and then seeing people get better. I think that's the reward for our work.
Exactly. The fact that I was handing someone off and couldn't see them, couldn't participate in more of their healing. Correct. So I really had to hone in on providing people a safe place to fall at their hardest moment is a beautiful thing. It's not my calling. Yeah. But now I can look back and go, oh, I'm really glad that was a piece because of what I learned there. But also now as a therapist, and I'm kind of your standard 50-minute outpatient. I have a center that we've developed that we can talk more about later. But I need to know, I need to have in my back pocket, oh, this is not going to be enough coming once or twice a week. Someone needs something more. And so it did help me increase my confidence and my competence and knowing we're okay. What you're telling me, I'm glad you came to me, but you really need more than what I can provide. So that part's good too. Right. But go ahead.
But besides the individual therapy, you have some programs. And the one that I'm really interested in is called Metta-Physical Edge, which is a play on her name. Yes. And it's really cool stuff. It's not just this team building exercise stuff. Yeah. It's getting real deep. Yes. To life's questions.
Life's questions, indeed.
And so I'm going to just, some of the things that you explore, I'm just going to kind of go through some of the questions that you have for these groups. Now, explain to me, who are these people? Are they work groups? Are they family? What are they?
So I'm very excited now to have Edge to Edge Center, which is the center that is across the hall. And part of why I wanted to create a center is that I've been in individual and couples work for so long. And of course I'm bound by confidentiality where I cannot connect people, tell them who the next person is. Okay. So I had people come in over the years and they were exploring some of those thirsting questions about life's deeper meanings, but they felt crazy. They felt disconnected from either family or friends, or gosh, I think about this, but my friends think I'm silly, or I think something's meaningful and they dismiss it, or I had this dream and then this thing happened after I had the dream. Am I psychic? That's weird to say. I don't want you to think I'm crazy. You know what I mean? And I'm like, no, I don't think you're crazy. So I have this metaphysical orientation that's personal and professional. And people are coming and talking about it individually with me. But I wanted to create a space where they could choose to come together. Now I'm there with them. I'm a therapist, the therapist, but it's not a therapy group. It's open to the community. I want human beings to be able to explore a lot of these questions that have come up a little more after 9/11. You know what I'm saying? Like, we as a culture seem to be seeking more meaning, but less trustful of institutions for providing the answer.
Right. And I think that our audience will really resonate with this first question that you do explore in these groups, because we have a lot of empathic people that are tuned into our network.
Yes.
And the question is, how can I stay sensitive to others but keep from being overwhelmed? So what is the consensus when you have these groups and this question is posed?
Right now, first of all, I've just started these groups. So we're at the very beginning of these conversations. So mainly, to answer as far as like some facts and data from you would come more from like when they show up individually in my office. And the degree of overwhelm that people feel, people that are intuitive, sensitive, sense, and it's really fun to explore stories about memories from when they were children and feeling things and how that confused them or scared them, or they were told to shut that down or shut that away. So they're coming to me as adults. I very primarily work with adults. I do work with some kids, and the kids I tend to be drawn to are the ones that are sensitive and don't know how to handle it. They feel different. What do we do when they're in a state of needing to belong? So it's this combination of I feel overwhelmed and I feel burdened and I feel guilty if I want to just run away or not connect. So I teach them, I work a lot with metaphor and visuals. I also talk about crystals and just anything of meaning. Crystals having their metaphysical properties as well is like an extra bonus in my opinion. But having someone ascribe meaning to, hey, do you have a special stone? Do you have a special anything you can put in your pocket? Right. Or in your shoe? I tell people sometimes to put a penny in their shoe to help ground them. And like as the energy comes to them, and then just like push them right down to that penny and into the earth and let the earth hold that for them.
That's a great technique.
Okay. So it's like I try to integrate according to that person's who they are, stuff that would be interesting, that have meaning to them, and try to combine a sense of visual. Of course, I'll use breath and stuff like that's very important, but some people that feels too, I don't know, breath sounds so intricate and involved. I'm just like, actually, just kind of like
we're all breathing.
We're all breathing, exactly. Just like as you're hearing someone's story, like I'm going to take that in, and then on my exhale, I'm going to give that back to you. Yeah. And then some people are like, but I don't want to give that back to them. That story's so hard. That energy is just so much. And I'm like, okay, give it to their higher self, or give it to their guides, or give it to their god or goddess, or however you hold it. Give it to the nature around them. Right. But you don't have to hold it, but you can take it in, feel, but all you need, there's that phrase going around now, touch, don't take. I don't know. It's just been coming up lately, so I've been sharing it. So it's like, so you can be touched by someone's story. Right. But don't take it on. And in fact, what I also like to add is if you take on and carry it for them, sometimes part of what wakes people up is the weight of their own story. Right. Yeah. So it's actually a gift to not take on somebody's. So that sometimes can shift people's guilt of, what if I'm not carrying this around and I don't take this portion of their stuff, Yeah. So that's where the conversation tends to go. And, of course I can talk about codependency and enabling and these other ways of talking about it that have been around psychology for a long time, and we're what I like to explore with people is more of this, the imaginal and the intuitive, and helping people just, oh yeah. I have this one person who talks about, she puts roses up in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, oh, I just put my roses up. And I'm like,
I
you
love
put your
that.
roses up? And she's like, I just put my roses up. And that's something that she created on her own. But like, as I'm starting to talk about this, she's like, oh, you're talking about my roses. I'm like, so like, what's the image? What's the image? What's the thing that you love? And she loves the roses because the roses are beautiful.
Right.
They symbolize love.
Mm-hmm.
They smell delicious, right? But they got those thorns, girl. Like, they protect themselves. And they protect her.
Well,
where she can still be loving.
Right.
Because a lot of course, feelers, they want to feel and care.
Mm-hmm.
They want to care. To say, oh, just care less, I don't think it's possible, especially for intuitive people. And
Right.
I think it ultimately then separates them from their own well-being. So,
yeah. And I get this a lot. A lot of my friends are like, well, you're just so, because I'm so intuitive, you're so emotional. What do you tell people that? Because
you're so emotional.
I know,
so,
like,
you're so
it's like
sensitive.
it's something flawed.
Exactly.
And I'm like, it's not, because I'm taking on that.
Yeah.
So what do you tell people?
I tell people, so I get this image of sensing as like the power of a sensor, the power of instead of it being a weakness, I get this image of, those sensors, I guess metal detectors they're called.
Yeah.
And people on the beach.
Yeah.
And walking around to get the jewels underneath the,
Sand.
the sand, right? The more powerful that detector is, the more they can glean from their searching. So I'll start with something like that, or come up with another kind of like a dish that senses. Like, your sensing ability is a superpower. We just happen to be living in a culture that still views sensing and feeling, since it's more defined from the feminine energy. And we're still, I think we all are aware of this, suffering from the chauvinism that shames both men and women, that falsely elevates and puts pressure on, and falsely subjugates and puts not mattering on. So anyway, I think it's all connected to that. So valuing
valuing it and not seeing it as a weakness.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad that you said that. It is. It's my superpower.
It is your superpower.
Oh.
Look, I sense. Yes. So instead of Superman, it's like I'm a sensor.
super
And kids too. I think all children come in sensing the world through unfamiliar senses. They can sense whether or not the mothering influence is around. They can sense. Okay, there's no right. So that we train them out of it. I mean, some of it's
we condition them out.
We condition them out. So, for example, a child comes in a room and they're like backing away because they can sense that the energy of this person is
Children are so perceptive.
Amazing. But what do we do? Or what does we like the main? No. Oh, honey, be polite.
Go give them a hug.
Don't be rude. Go give them a hug. Right. So I'm going to shame them. I'm going to direct them. I'm going to say, don't pay attention to what's happening, because we have a form that I'm telling you to walk right into something that you feel is dangerous. Otherwise, we're going to criticize you. And so there's 2 levels of safety then. And then we get more trained, understandably so, out of survival. Yeah. And as we develop our brains, like we come in with it really big, it ebbs. I know for me as a child, I could see, and I could see energy. I could see spirits. I've asked for that to return because I feel less scared about that now. I feel very comfortable with that. It's not returning. So I think my inner child, I think, is still like, I'm not quite sure. That freaked me out. Yeah. So some of it's even within the psychology of the self, like truly, like I do a lot of meditative work. I'll go and talk with my inner child. I will go to some of those moments where I saw things and that was scary, and I'll just be with her, and I'll be with what was there in the way that I can now. And even though that scene goes so much more, it goes beautifully, I think my inner child is still like, really not wanting to see. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, I can sense in other ways. I'm very visual, like up in my head. I'll get in sessions with people, and in the living of life, I'll get images or metaphors that then, oh my, what a coincidence. Right. is directly in somebody's story. So I'll say, I'm kind of seeing a train. It's kind of like train on train track. And they're like, did I already tell you about what happened to me on a train when I was 10 years old? And I'm like, no, but let's talk about that, right? So it's been interesting with therapy that happens in these groups, as well as happens in individual. Is like as I return to and open more to my intuitive stuff and call upon my imagination, my intuition, it's more and more directly correlating with people's histories.
Yes,
and then they're like, "What are you?
Are you psychic?
What are you?" And I'm like, and I think I'm still discovering who I am.
I think that's fantastic.
It's
using your intuition now. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
How can I just be when doing is how you get things done? So basically, how do I stay present when I've got everything else that's going on?
Yeah.
That's a big one.
This one's a big one.
Yeah.
And this is going to generate, and it's already been generating in my group. My group.
Mm-hmm.
All of the talk and mindfulness is very popular right now, and I hope it remains popular.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really up. There's lots of books on it and talks on it, and so just be in the moment and let go of all thoughts and all feelings, and just bring with compassion to your presence.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a wonderful, necessary, needed place to get centered, so then we can have creative alignment to then do our doing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And so the being a feminine energy, and the doing being a masculine energy, and the being, the feminine, creating the doing, where I tend to talk about it with people is like, pausing your doing to be in the stillness, the non-doing. At the very least, we see this with sleep. We see this with athletics. I mean, even teams need a timeout,
right,
where they're not playing, but if they didn't take that time out, the next doing wouldn't happen, right?
Right.
So those are some of the ways that I talk about it with people, is that if we can't be, and also there's this, if I can't be with myself, with where I am right now, my next doing might not be where I want to go. And then it's wasted time. And then later I end up regretting how that all went.
Yeah. And then ruminating about it.
Yeah.
And then therefore you're wasting more time and not getting back to being centered.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I really see it as a yin yang, as a connected piece. I think some writings and some teachings right now can be too much on the being, and I think it's creating some of the doing anxiety of like, yeah, but I got a plan for next year. What do you mean I got to live in the now?
Right.
And I know Eckhart Tolle talks a lot about this, and I think he and Oprah are doing something this month that may be finished now. And the way that Oprah can bring some of our real life questions to his orientation around all that has been good too. And so I'm kind of more of the Oprah vibe, and kind of bring in these concepts and help people integrate that in the living of their life.
Right.
Does that answer?
It does answer.
It does? Okay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how, so both are important, the being as an initiator, as a pause, being key. And too much being without any doing. Sometimes people need to be told, get off the couch.
Yeah.
Some people need to be told, sit your butt down for a second.
Yeah.
You're going around like you're like a chicken.
Right. What are your thoughts about our society and how we can better support mental health awareness? And it's funny because while we're shooting this is May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yeah.
Which I think it's good that at least we have a month, but I think it needs to be, a yearly, awareness about mental health, because it's brought up in our, in the news, and we're talking about it more now, and it's gotten to be more acceptable.
Yeah.
But how can we better support mental health awareness?
So, I see a lot of things lately, like buy local, the stuff around what are we going to do in our communities, what's close to us, and we've seen some of that even post the 2016 election, of like, okay, wait a second, how can more of us stand up and participate in our families and our communities around these issues, and stop giving away our power to the
Mhm.
powers that be to handle these issues for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I really feel it's places like Center for Love and Light and this that you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
what I'm doing over at Edge to Edge Center,
Mhm.
of people creating more spaces, places for conversation and connection about all of it. Because it's not just mental health. It is this holistic model of what are you thinking and feeling about this? And what do you feel like you can do about it? I don't feel like I can do anything.
Mhm.
Well, what's that like?
Yeah.
And is that true?
Right.
That we can really do nothing? But we need to, So as I've thought about that, that's kind of how I feel, is the grassroots caring for our neighbor, truly caring for our neighbors and creating more of a sense of connection and community in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We keep going to, of course, devices and information out there. So going in and right here, like coming and sitting and talking with you and getting to know even my neighbors here at, this On a Light community. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, you're doing that. And then us inspiring each other.
Yeah.
So, and those are my thoughts on that, really.
Okay.
Can we be compassionate with ourselves, with the close one another? And can we really look at how can we address the mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual aspects of who we are? And I really think that's where we are evolutionarily as beings. But that might be another day.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're being called to do.
Yeah. And I hope that I think that we'll see it in our lifetime.
Yes.
So
I think we
it's
are.
exciting stuff coming
I think
along.
we are at this crest.
Well, Metta, I am
Yes.
so glad that you came on.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's fun to be out of my my cocoon.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
to get you further out of your cocoon,
Okay.
for my guests, I do 5 questions. It's called Fast 5 Q&A.
Fast 5.
Fast 5.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you just off the cuff tell me what your answer is.
Okay.
Kind of gets insight. People can see you outside of the world as
Okay.
being a therapist.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go.
Okay.
Favorite animal?
Monkey.
Okay. If you could switch places with anyone for one day, who would you pick?
Alive or dead?
Mm-hmm.
Shakespeare.
Okay. What do you wish you knew more about?
Oh, wow. Can I come back to that one?
No. Go.
Okay.
What's the first thing that
off
pops
the
in your-
cuff
off the
is
cuff?
sharks, because my kid is really fascinated with sharks and he loves to talk about them. And maybe he's going to be the source of my knowledge.
Sharks is it then. Okay. What age do you wish you could permanently be?
Right now.
Okay.
This is a beautiful time. I'm 49. This is my 50th year.
Excellent. What's the best way to start a day?
Breathing and just repeating the word love.
Love it.
Just breathing and repeat and letting that flow through me before my feet hit the ground.
How can people find you and learn more about you?
So edge2edgecenter.com is my website.
Mm-hmm.
And the email is info@edge2edgecenter.com.
Thank you so
That's
much
the
for
best
being
way.
on my show.
I'm so glad to
Yay!
be here and to meet you, and I look forward to getting to know you. I have a feeling we might.
We're going to collaborate. Totally.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.